Good morning. Hey, it's a Monday morning, 6:11. We're at our study here in the Word. Waking up in the Word is probably one of the best things that we could do, especially in some very troubling times. Hope you had a grand weekend. Hope it was a good weekend. Hope that you were blessed. Hope you had opportunity to receive your church service through streaming or some other means. This week we're actually praying about how we could get the word out to some folks that don't have internet, and so we're looking at DVDs, CDs, maybe even a pen drive. So we're going to be kind of scouring out and seeing what's going on there. In the meantime, I'd like to start off with just a couple of things to encourage us in the Word. This week, we're going to get into what's called a topical study. Last week, we were in an expository study. The expository study is a verse after verse after verse after verse study in which we draw the conclusion of what the writer and what God intended out of that study. Today, we're going to start a topical study, and where we're going to start is in Isaiah 26. Isaiah 26. And before we do, let me just also let you know of some other tools that are out there these days. We talked about some tools last week about how you could use different types of markers and different types of study things. And remember what I said on that. I said, hey, make sure that you're not using something that could cause to bleed through the pages. We said, hey, there's bookmarks that can be used. We even got into the area of studying from a text area like this. And so we're going to go to Isaiah 26, and we'll get into that in just a moment. Another thing I want to talk about today is Bibles. There are various Bibles that can be used if you go online, or if you go to probably the most well-known is Christian Book Distributor, CBD, and they tend to send out a catalog once a year, just buku Bibles, and you're like, I don't know which kind to get. Well, as I've said to you, I'm King James, and I find it to be the best for study, and so it's very reliable, has been proven to be reliable, and I can get into the textual things that go on there as well. But I don't want to get into translations today. Maybe that'll be for another day. But I do want to get into types of Bibles that you might want to look for. Many years ago, my father-in-law, Richard Worsham, got me into wide margin. I like wide margin because I can put my own personal notes, and it really helps me. And when I've gone through a Bible or I've used up a Bible, I have a tendency then to have those notes, and I set that aside, and I then start with another wide margin Bible. Other types of Bibles have notes in them. This happens to be a Ryrie that was given to me many years ago, and the notes are usually at the bottom of the page. Sometimes they're in the margins, sometimes they're onto the sides, and this is called a Ryrie Study Bible. There are others that are out there, and all I can say is if you're in doubt about what kind of Bible to get, how about you ask your pastor, okay? And they've been obviously in that work of looking at Bibles, studying Bibles. They'll guide you to certain Bibles that they think would be profitable for you, and then go from there. That would be an encouragement to the pastor, and would also be an encouragement to yourself in the long run. The other Bible I want to show you is another type of Bible that's out there, and this kind of Bible is actually written chronologically. So I had the privilege of meeting Dr. Reese down at Crown College years ago. He worked on staff when my father-in-law was the chair of the Bible there at Crown, and what he did was compile the scriptures, but he put to his best ability, not by inspiration of God, he laid out the readings so that they would be chronological. So particularly when you get into the books of the Kings and the Chronicles, you start talking about many kings. And you start talking about the divided nation. You have the 10 tribes to the north, the 2 tribes to the south, and you have kings for each one of those for each one of those groupings, right? So it gets confusing. So he lays it out in columns so that you can see what king is ruling at the same time with the other king, and you kind of see what's going on. It's also good when the Gospels, when you're reading the Gospel of John and the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of Matthew, and you see those laid out chronologically, you start to see how things are interwoven between the two. So I want to encourage you in that. That might be a way to do some Bible study, and I'm sure you can order online and have them delivered to you. So let's get into our study today, into the Word. We're going to go over to Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, chapter number 26. As I was looking at this last night, I was tempted to go right into the whole chapter of Isaiah 26. But one of the things that is about Isaiah is it can get really complicated in the sense that there's a lot of underlying things going on. And so we're going to just spend our time there on verse 3. So let's begin reading there in chapter 26, verse 1. In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. Salvation will God appoint for walls and bulwarks. Ironically, I wanted to study that phrase, in that day. That shows up 13 times in Isaiah alone. Whoa, and it seems to have great application to the day we're in. But I'll leave that for another day, or maybe you'd like to study that yourself. Verse 2, open ye the gates, that the righteous nations which keepeth the truth may enter in. And then notice verse 3, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. And we can't miss verse 4, trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. Now, I'm just going to point out in my Bible and some Bibles you might have markings like this. That indicates a new paragraph. So this section here from verses 1 through 4 is like one paragraph. So that's where we're going to kind of try to keep this in some context. And then it starts in a new paragraph moving forward. Not all Bibles have that. I am grateful this one does. It helps me to understand natural breakings, okay? So with that, let's talk about the idea of peace. Do you think there's a lot of restlessness going on today? I would say, oh yes. Would you say there's a lot of people who have troubled hearts? I would say, oh yes. And so this week we're going to look at the combination of this idea of what is peace, how does it affect my heart, how does my mind play into that, and then how do my actions come out of that, okay? And so to do that, I think the best place we can go, using my handy-dandy bookmark again, notice here in John 14. Do you think the disciples are a little troubled right now? Oh, they are. The disciples are troubled because the Lord is telling them he's about to die. And he says to them in verse 1, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. And then he goes into these great texts that we use over and over again. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will again, I'm going to read it right out of the text here because I can't see it on my phone. I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go ye know, and the way ye know. And Thomas saith unto him, Lord, we know not whither thou goest, and how can we know the way? And Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, the life. No man can come unto the Father but unto me, but by me. And then let us not forget where he goes with this later on. At the end of this chapter, he goes into chapter 14, verse 27. He says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you." Underline it if you have it there in your Bible. "Not as the world giveth." So the peace that we're going to talk about this week is not like the world gives. "Give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." Let not your heart be troubled. Now, the church that I pastored and I've pastored over years, several places. This text is really important because in that text we read, it says, let not your heart be troubled. So that means the responsibility for letting a heart be troubled is whose? It's mine. It's my job to monitor my heart. And when I have trouble in my heart, there's an indicator there. It's like the trouble light on your engine when you're driving. If I see that little blinking light at me on my dashboard, it says, hey, maybe I should pull over, stop, and I should check it out. It's the same when my heart is troubled. When my heart is troubled, it is an indicator of something. That's what we want to look into this week as we continue to strive to understand the peace that passes understanding, the peace not as the world giveth, but as the Lord giveth. This is the peace that we want to have. There's a direct connection between my heart, my mind, and this peace in my spirit that we're going to refer to. So, as is the case, I start off with my study. And here's, because of time, this is where we're going to leave it. We'll pick it up tomorrow, but in the Isaiah 26:3, I'm going to look at this idea, what is perfect peace? I want to know who thou is, because that's important. This is where this peace comes from. What does it mean that this person or this being is going to do to keep it for me? What is the word perfect? What is the word peace here? We've already looked at John 14:1 and verse 27, which is a good key foundation. We're going to look at what is the mind. How do we stay there on thee, this individual who is giving me this peace? I think you know the answer. It's obviously God. But we want to say, how does that work? We want to see who or what we need to do in that relationship, okay? So this week, we're going to be looking at that. It's a topical study. Last week was an expository study. Today, we're taking the topic of peace. This week, we're going to walk through the topic of peace and see the connectors. I may get into some diagramming as well, which might be something you like. For those folks that tend to be a little artsy and they like to draw and color, I would encourage you to get out your coloring pens, your rulers, other things, and we will do some diagramming this week as well. So with that, God bless. Go with God. Let God go with you. And guess what? You'll know the peace that passes all understanding.